Former chief of the Pentagon's unidentified flying object investigation program, Luis Elizondo, has confirmed to the Washington Examiner that the U.S. government is considering whether UFOs are or are not of earthly origin.
Elizondo recently said these flying objects are, quote, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, or the creation of an Earth-based intelligence unknown to human society. Commentary writer at the Washington Examiner, Tom Rogan, joins us to discuss now. Tom, what do you think? Are they extra-worldly or interdimensional? Which one is it?
You know, we don't know, but the fact that that is a legitimate question deserving of answers, the pursuit of answers rather than scorn or stigma, I think speaks to the importance of this issue, both in terms of, you know, security implications, but broader philosophical questions. So, you know, the legitimacy of the question in and of itself now, I think, is a striking evolution from where we've been in the past.
Yeah, so Tom, this report is really, really big in my opinion, because Luis Elizondo has sort of been out there and talking about all of this stuff, but his confirmation to you that this is something the government is actively investigating, and that's something that people sort of suspected, but to actually have confirmation from the man who's the former chief of the Pentagon's program that's looking into this is quite a big deal. And in his estimation, in your report and in your interview with him, he calls this the probability that this is of human sort of military programs infinitesimally low. The probability that what we're seeing with some of these UAP videos is infinitesimally low, that it would be coming from the United States, China, or Russia. So my question to you is, why trust Luis Elizondo? He's coming out of the Pentagon. Is this an info operation, right? Why should people not believe that this information is being either leaked selectively and then confirmed selectively, and then Elizondo is sort of making selective appearances in the press? You've covered this for a really long time. Why is that skepticism unwarranted?
Well, I think the first reason is that there are a considerable number of other people, including some still working on the issue actively, who will say the same thing and who have said the same thing to me. I think what's key about Elizondo is he's had the courage to go on the record and say it. But he is not one by in and of himself. He reflects a broader, gamut of officials, experts, as it were, in the government who have come to that same conclusion. I also think it's important to note that when we're talking here about some of these UFOs, so the Navy 2004 Tic Tac that people have paid attention to would be one of them. There are others. It's a special class, right? That not all UFOs that the Navy's been seeing are under this class. Some are likely to turn out being misidentified weather balloons, or maybe Chinese and Russian, sensor platforms that they've launched off cargo ships, which the Drive website did a very good piece kind of examining. It's this special quality where we see, instantaneous acceleration, hypersonics, transmedium travel, which is to say space, air, sea, hundreds of knots under the water, no conventional propulsion source, G-forces that would range up, based on our understanding of, contemporary physics, into the 700s. Mm-hmm. That category, where you've got both pilots seeing it, they're recording it on their gun cameras, which are the cameras underneath the jets, the Aegis cruisers, which are very advanced radar systems, the submarines, the satellites are all picking up the same thing in the same space in the same time. Then you've got a lot of data to say, okay, this is a special class of something. What that something is, again, as as you suggested in the first question, is yet to be defined.
That's absolutely right, Tom. I mean, when we look at some of these videos, the special class of videos that you say, these things move by unconventional means, and we have no idea to explain how they're actually doing what they're doing. So what other explanation could there possibly be? We can't build things that do this, so who did?
Right, exactly. And I think one of the notable things, that Elizondo sort of hinted at in the piece, and, unfortunately wouldn't really go further, is the idea that the materials, the metamaterials used to produce some of these things are, allow for a different range of technical capability, at least theoretically, right? That if you started looking at some of the theoretical, metallurgy and theoretical physics, you get into an area where perhaps you can start explaining this stuff. But the top line, I think, is that we don't know. We have theories, but we don't know. But it does represent an unconventional realm of physics. And the one thing I always say in terms of at least let's try and resource up in getting answers. Well, two things. Number one, we don't want the Chinese and Russians who are studying it as well and experiencing it as well to figure it out before we can. And secondly, in the technical characteristics of these craft, at least in the displayed performance, regardless of the philosophical questions of origin and intent, the capability question, is so instrumental because there's think about it, right? If you could get something from point A to B in such a short period of time without using jet fuel, what would that mean for the environment in terms of carbon emissions, or simply the ease to go and, have lunch in London or Paris and be back, in 3 minutes. So that we don't know, right? And that's just pie in the sky theory, but clearly we should want to know.
So one of the things that Elizondo confirmed in his conversation with you is that this has been an active consideration of the U.S. government, whether these are not of earthly origin, and continues to be an active investigation or consideration of the U.S. government and of the Pentagon. So what do we know about the Russian and the Chinese efforts to do the same, to sort of actively investigate these phenomenon and they've been doing this for years as well. What does that tell us about the considerations of whether these are of earthly origins? Basically, what does what we know about what they're doing tell us about what this stuff might be?
Yeah, well, so the South China Morning Post, which is a very, very good, media outlet based out of Hong Kong, did a really good piece a couple of weeks ago on how the Chinese People's Liberation Army, their military, is using AI-based software to try and track and catalog these things, because they, are having the same sort of flight experiences from their pilots. I would also assume that they're seeing them at nuclear sites because there's a synergy between nuclear sites and the appearance of these things. But the Russians, since the Cold War, have been interested that, a lot of research, much more overt in terms of compared to the US Navy, about seeing these things under the water, or at least tracking them. And, based on the Russian interest in what would be called strategic overmatch, which is the idea of being able to develop a capability that gives you a massive advantage over an adversary, it would make obvious sense that they would invest in it. I think they also, because of the Russian tradition of sort of secular, central government, that perhaps the Russians have had more ease in terms of the government bureaucracy in resourcing these things and not worrying about some of the philosophical questions as much as, say, the US traditionally has. I think in the coming years, one of the things we'll learn is the degree to which the US Air Force has had some unfortunate decisions because certain senior officers believed this, had a quality that did not, that was perhaps anathema to American religious and cultural values. I think that clearly is not the kind of approach that policymakers, when you're faced with something that might be a threat or might be something unconventional, you've got to try and address it.
Absolutely. Tom, thank you so much for your reporting. I highly recommend, if you're interested in this issue, and even if you aren't, it is such an important issue, even if the media doesn't want to admit it. So I highly recommend you follow Tom's work at the Washington Examiner. We appreciate your time today, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, the Young Turks' Cenk Uygur responds to the controversy surrounding Congresswoman Ilhan Omar next. We'll be right back.